One of the biggest management lessons that I ever got, I actually got when I made my very first hire. You know, when I went to work as a manager and I had to hire somebody, I wanted to hire somebody who looked like they worked for IBM. I wanted to send somebody to the home office who was unbelievably impressive. And I wound up about ready to hire a woman by the name of Betsy Rucker, and she was a phenomenal candidate. And about a week before that I was ready to make the offer, my wife called me and said, "Hey, you need to talk to this guy, John." And I said, "Well, who's John?" She said, "Well, he's called here like 10 times. I said, "Well, he doesn't sound like somebody I want to talk to. He sounds like a pest." She said, No, he's very nice." So I remember calling him on the phone, and I had remembered his resume. And when I talked to him on the phone, I said, "Look, here's the truth. The truth is you're 23 years old. You have no sales experience. I have no interest in interviewing you." And he said this to me. He said, "Look, I understand that you want to hire somebody with more experience, but I have the experience of any 30-year-old you've ever met." And he explained to me why he had this rich experience at the age of 23. And then he said this, "Can I at least have an interview?" And I said, "Well, that's actually pretty good." So I interview him the next day, and he's not overly impressive. He certainly doesn't have that kind of image that Betsy had, but I listened to him and I liked him. So I decided, well, at least interview him a second time. So I interviewed him a second time, and I liked him a lot, but he was not, to me, as qualified as Betsy was. And so I decided that I was going to hire Betsy. So on a Friday night, I called him on the phone and told him, "I'm not going to hire you." And so Saturday at 1 o'clock, I go to my mailbox in Birmingham, Alabama, 3352 Overton Road, and there are 5 letters in my mailbox. One of them is from the president of Auburn University. One of them is from the governor of Alabama. One of them is from the vice president of the largest dairy in Alabama. One is from a surgeon who would be his biggest customer. And one is from the owner of the only independent chain store in Montgomery, Alabama. And all 5 of them said the same thing: "You are functionally illiterate and stupid if you don't hire this man. He's the most incredible person I've ever met." So now I'm in. So I call Betsy, turn her down, and I offer him the job. Now, he has to take a test in order to go to work for us, which he flunks. I talked my boss into letting me hire him even though he flunked the test. Now, I never hired anybody, and my boss was very, very skeptical that this was the right thing to do, but he let me do it. So John comes back from the training school, and I go to work with him, and the very first call I make. And when I finish making the call, he says this to me: "I can't do that." I said, "You can't do what?" He said, "I can't do what you just did." I said, "Why not?" He said, "That's not my style." I said, "You got no style, man. I'm here to give you style." Now, I spent 3 days with him, and every single time he would not make the call, I would make the call, and he would say, "I can't do that. It's not my style." So after 3 days, I finally said, "Look, I never thought I would hire somebody who was so difficult to deal with. I'm going back to Birmingham. Leave me alone. I'll call you in a week." Now, in my mind, I got to figure out a way to fire this guy and fire him and save face with my boss, who basically told me not to hire him. Now, before I left, I told him, I said, "Don't call me." He said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" I said, "We just launched this new product. Go and see if you can get some orders for it." Now, I was leading the country in sales with $5,000 of sales per month by each of my reps. I had 8 reps, so I was doing $40,000 a month. He calls me 8 days later, and here's what he says to me: "What do you mean to do these orders?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you told me to get these orders." I said, "Well, how much is it?" He said, $26,000. And I said, "I like your style." Now, this was a huge lesson for me, because what he taught me by telling me that what I was doing was not his style. You see, what he was saying to me was this: don't make me you. And if I learned anything from that experience, it's my job as a leader is to bring out the greatness that's in the individual and not simply share what I know. And as a leader, our job is to bring out the greatness in individuals and not create robots. A huge lesson for me. And I will tell you, he's the most successful pharmaceutical person I've ever met, but we have different styles.